Hey everyone, it's Professor Kettler. I'm going to give you this video about how to complete your activity in Module 2. So the first thing that you will want to do is go ahead and go to the activity in the module. And just like before, you're going to want to click on the requirements in the rubric, so that way you can review that before you begin the assignment. This is just kind of giving you an overview about how scientists use different methods to collect and analyze data. And why those methods are important. They give you a template that we are going to download, and it is asking you to, in the first part, identify in your chosen article from week 1, so the one that you're going to keep for the whole semester, what was the approach of the scientific research that the scientist in your story chose to do. And then part 2, you're going to draft 2 research questions you're interested in asking about the main idea of your news story. I am going to go ahead and use the previous article that I chose in week 1 to show you examples of this. The other thing that you need to make sure to do is go ahead and review the rubric and how I'm going to score this, because I don't want just a few sentences in this particular activity. The more work you put into this activity, the less work you are going to have to do in week 7 when you are turning in your final project. So when you are identifying the approach of the scientific research, it needs to be pretty detailed. It doesn't need to just be a sentence that says they used a model. As far as your scientific questions, you need to make sure that they are measurable and that they're based on the main idea of that chosen news article, and that they're very focused. So clearly, part of that, part of the things that they're trying to discover in the article that you chose. So when we go to open up this template, it's going to download to your device. We're going to go ahead and open it. We're going to enable us to edit it, and we're going to go ahead and look at part 1. So it says identify an approach to scientific research addressed in a chosen news story. Once again, you cannot copy and paste from the news story. That is plagiarism. If you want to use things from your news story, you need to properly cite it in APA format. So we're going to go look at the article that I chose, and we're going to find out what were the methods that they used to complete their research. So here's my science article, and they're claiming that by 2080, around 70% of the world's oceans are going to be suffocating from a lack of oxygen. And that we have actually passed the critical threshold of oxygen loss in 2021. So they are basically sounding the alarm. So let's look. We are going to be looking at how did they find this out. So first thing, they've been tracking the ocean's steady decline in oxygen for years. So that's the first method, okay? So you would want to go back to your paper, and you would say, scientists probably over time have been tracking the oxygen levels of the ocean. Okay, so that's the first piece. Now it says this new study is the first to use climate models to predict how and when deoxygenation will occur in the world's oceans. So for our next sentence, we would say climate models are now being used to make predictions about oxygen levels in the oceans. Okay, so we're just summarizing here, and we're not directly copying. We're just talking about what the article actually says. So this is talking about what the models actually predict. And let's see what else we are talking about. This is just kind of talking about what their results were. Okay, here we go. The researchers identified the beginning of the deoxygenation process in the 3 ocean depths. Then it says the study predicted when deoxygenation would occur using data from 2 climate model simulations. So this is where we want to talk about what the model simulations were. So one representing a high emissions scenario and other representing a low emissions scenario. So the emissions they're talking about are greenhouse gas emissions. So we would want to say 2 different climate models were used to extract the data that was used in the study. One model used a high emissions scenario and another used a emissions scenario. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing with you, but you get the point of what I'm doing here. I'm fully describing how they conducted this research. Now, as before, like I told you guys, sometimes you can get, to the actual journal reference and you can go and look at their methods. So in this particular one, the methods are typically after the introduction. So this is a little more detailed. It says we use monthly dissolved oxygen and surface air temperature data from, this modeling project. So that's a great thing to include in there because they were tracking it monthly. And not only were they tracking dissolved oxygen, but they were tracking air temperature. Then they just talk about how they downloaded it and how they used it in regards to a pattern scaling method. And then lots of complicated math. So you don't have to be that detailed. I'm just trying to get you to understand that you want to summarize, give a good overview of what they did. I understand this is really complicated, for this particular one, it's really complicated what they did. So while I encourage you to fully understand the scientific methods that they used, it is okay to summarize and you don't have to include, pages and pages of information here. It's just helpful if you can get into the journal article and review the methods because then sometimes they're a little bit more detailed. And the more detailed you are in this section, the less work you have to do in week 7 whenever you are pulling all this together for your project. Okay, so part 2 is asking you to draft 2 research questions you're interested in, asking about the main idea of your news story. You have to make sure that your questions are measurable and focused. So a measurable question is going to produce some kind of results, whether that is qualitative or quantitative. So we're going to do question 1. So my article is mainly about how dissolved oxygen rates are dropping. And it's saying that it's likely affecting fisheries worldwide. But they don't actually, in this article, talk about which fisheries and the rate in which it's occurring or anything like that. So my first question would be, at what rate are fisheries expected to decline by, let's go with 2030. Okay, so this is considered measurable, okay? And the reason why is because they can calculate the rate based on their climate models. And so they could they could use that rate to make a prediction of what's going to happen by 2030. So anything that's going to produce some kind of calculated result is considered measurable, or some kind of like, how many is this producing? I'm also going to include some resources in underneath this video in the class announcements, so that way you can kind of see, examples of measurable questions. Questions that would be bad would be, bad examples. How many fish are going to die? While that's interesting, and we would like to know that, that's not measurable with the current research that they are doing. They can't make that prediction. They can only tell you, how much oxygen is dissolved or how much dissolved oxygen is missing. Another one would be, are the climate models good? Once again, that's not measurable. Okay, it's an objective statement, it's a subjective statement on whether or not they are good or not. The scientific question that you want to pose would be something that an experiment could be performed around, because later in your later assignments, you're gonna have to develop a method for how this question would be answered. So bear that in mind whenever you are coming up with your questions, is that later your questions, you have to design an experiment for them, and you have to design a testable method in order to do this. So for instance, I might even want to refine this a little bit more. At what rate are the cod fisheries expected to decline? So that's more focused instead of just fisheries, because there's a lot of different fish out there. And an experimental design would work for this, right? I could go to the cod fisheries and I could see, I could perform research to see how many cod we currently have, as well as, at what rate are they dying off each year from suffocation. So that hopefully helps you. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me. Remember that you need 2 questions. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of how you would do this particular assignment. But yes, reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your work.